Hello, my name is Kylie, and today we're going to talk about Imagine Wanting Only This by Kristen Radke. Before we start, I will give you a quick overview of the book. This is a graphic novel that focuses on Kristen Radke's youth as she navigates through college, a relationship, and the death of her uncle. To overcome her grief, she begins to explore abandoned buildings and research their history. At the end of her journey, she discovers that one day we will all be gone and nothing will be left to prove our existence. With this in mind, today we will be discussing the relationship between this graphic novel and the 21st century in which it was published. In particular, our discussion will be focusing on how the abandoned buildings in this graphic novel speak to the loss of our culture throughout history. So our first topic today is going to address the first town that Kristen encountered. So this first location was Gary, Indiana, and it is where Kristen began to search for understanding. At one point in time, Gary was called the City of the Century. However, when Kristen first heard of its existence, a classmate said, "Gary is a metaphor for the decay of the contemporary culture. More than culture. Civilization." Historically, Gary was a town that became wealthy during the war because it had a steel factory. During the time, this was a huge asset, and the people in the town lived well because steel was in high demand. Of course, this only lasted until after the war, when other steel companies began to compete with Gary. People had to find new jobs elsewhere, as the small town factory could no longer keep up with its foreign competition. This story is not so different from other small towns that were abandoned due to similar circumstances. This was a common occurrence throughout history, and these ghost cities truly showed the decay of our culture and beliefs. We as humans so quickly throw away places that no longer benefit us. It is only when the history is positive or significant that we feel the need to preserve our history and culture. As the story progresses, the reader is again presented with the 21st century take on history when Kristen spends time in Como, Italy. While there, she was able to explore buildings that were carefully preserved over time. These buildings have been around much longer than those in Gary because their worth was deemed more valuable. This intrigued Kristen, so much so that on page 81 she discussed how strange it is that some towns are preserved while others are not. This, I feel, speaks to our culture and our selective appreciation of history. After the war, Gary was just a reminder of the failure of the steel company. There was nothing left that the people found charming or worthwhile about it. Because of this, it was abandoned. However, the beautiful buildings Kristen saw in Como were well preserved because we decided to acknowledge their worth. Whether it be because of religion or history, we deem them worth saving. This, I feel, speaks to not only the past, but also to now. To this day, we still quickly abandon and try to forget our past unless it's meaningful. One such example is how the Eiffel Tower stands and is idolized, while more recent creations have been destroyed or abandoned. Of course, they have different contexts and histories, but that is the point. We try to erase the past to make for a better future. I will now show you a picture of Kristen from the book as she kind of thinks over what Como was like and how it was different than what she was used to in Gary. So that is on page 80. So as you can see, this is Kristen as she is going through thinking about all the different places that she's seen. And then this is also her on the top of the next page discussing to herself how weird it is that some places can exist and be cherished by society, whereas others, like Gary, fall by the wayside. So it's kind of her pondering it. Okay, on to our third topic. So even later in the book, so after she got back from Italy, she traveled to the Philippine island of Corregor on page 129. So from pages 130 to 136, she toured abandoned ruins on the island that used to be a World War II military base. So I will pull up a picture of that from the book right here. And so while she was there, she began to think about the other ways in which we think of ruins in history. So as you can see, these are where I got my quotes from that I'll say in a minute from this page. And it shows various ruins. Okay. So she begins to think about other ruins and how they're thought of by society. The example I really like was when Kristen said, the Romantics say, as a symbolic of the art, the Romantics saw ruins as a symbolic of the art that came before them, whereas the Middle Ages watched ruin as ominous reminders of more decay ahead. This perfectly represents my arguments of how the different ways we see ruins and the past. We choose what parts of our history and culture is allowed to decay. As before, this does not apply to just the past. To this day, we tour these abandoned places trying to get back what was lost. Through Kristen's eyes, we were given a new fascination that didn't exist in the past. Finally, the last big piece of this novel that ties together this argument is pages 268 and 269. On these two wordless pages, images of what Kristen believes New York would look like underwater is presented. So I'll also show you a picture of that. Here it is. As you can see, you have the whole street filled with water, and then you also have Grand Central covered in water. So, when thinking about the 21st century, New York is one of the most popular tourist attractions. People come from all over the world to see the history and the ingenuity. It may not be in ruins yet, but someday it will be. It will be abandoned like Gary and the other monuments. In her vision, Kristen is putting this into perspective for the reader. By looking at the ruins, she has realized that all places will look this way someday. Humans will not last forever to preserve their history and destroy it. Soon, only Mother Nature will have that luxury that we take for granted. It is quite astounding to think that an entire civilization can be abandoned or destroyed in seconds. In conclusion, Kristen Radke does an amazing job integrating the ruins of the past into her 21st century story. This story may have focused on her explorations of the abandoned buildings of the past, but it actually worked as a comment on the ruins that will exist in the future. We have not changed over time, and because of this, we will continue to disregard and abandon our past. By placing this story in the 21st century, we were able to reflect upon our past. We may have not been present during the abandoning of the buildings, but through Kristen's eyes, we saw a new fascination. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my second blog.